Now you know how to calculate break-even volume and target profit volume, but you only know how to do it for a product, for a company that produces a single product. Think about all the companies out there. Can you think of a company that only has a single product? Probably not. Most companies have more than one product they offer. So we need to figure out how to break even, how to calculate break even and target profit volume for multi-product companies. This analysis that we're going to talk about will apply whether your company has 2 products, 3 products, or 500,000 products. We're just going to talk about 2 products just to make it easier, but it's the same analysis that you would do for any number of products. Calculating break-even sales is a 3-step process for multi-product firms. First, we calculate what we call weighted average contribution margin. Next, we calculate our break-even point for total units by using this formula, and we'll talk about it later on in the slides. And then we finally determine how many units of each product we need to sell in order to break even. We're going to go through these steps using our same example that we've used before. The only difference is that I've added some additional information. So now, instead of selling just regular posters that she sold for $35, they will also sell large posters. When we are looking at a multi-product sales revenue example, I'm going to tell you which numbers that you need to be aware of so you can use those in your calculations. You need to know the sales price per unit and the variable cost per unit of each type of poster. You also need to know fixed costs, and you also need to know your sales mix. And that is where this particular example says Kay estimates that she can sell 3 large posters for every 5 regular posters. Your sales mix is 3 large for every 5 regular posters. So you need to know those 2 numbers as well, because that's something that's essential to calculate your weighted average contribution margin. This is how you're going to set up your solution. You're going to have 2 columns, or rather 3 columns. You're going to have one for regular, one for large, and one for a total column. Then you're going to have these items along as your description. So you start off with your sales price per unit, then you have variable cost per unit, and then you take a subtotal, which is your contribution margin per unit. You know that sales price less variable cost is contribution margin per unit. Next, you put your sales mix, and then you have another line item for total contribution margin. And that will help you calculate your weighted average contribution margin, or what we call WACM. Let's put numbers, so I'll show you how this works. Be sure to copy this down, bring this format to class, because every single question you're going to encounter is going to follow the same format. So it's kind of either you know it or you don't. Going back to your example, we know that regular we're selling for 35, largest sell for 70. Variable cost of each is 21 and 40 respectively. If you can't remember, be sure to pause this video and go back and look at those numbers again. That will give you a contribution margin of 14 for regular and 30 for large posters. So you got your step 1 is to put your sales price for each item. Next, variable cost for each item, and contribution margin per unit for each item. For these 3 steps, you ignore the total column. You do not total it across. The next line says sales mix. That is where you're going to go see what your sales mix is for regular and large posters. They said that the sales mix was for every 5 regular posters she sells 3 large posters. At this point, you do take a total across and you say that your total sales are 8 units. So you're going to sell 8 units. So you're going to sell 5 regular, 3 large. That's total sales mix of 8 units. Next, you calculate your contribution margin. For your regular posters, your contribution margin is calculated by multiplying your contribution margin per unit, which is 14, times your sales mix, which is 5. So 14 times 5 is $70. That is your contribution margin for the 5 regular posters. Next, you're going to calculate your contribution margin for the large posters, which is 30 times 3 or 90. And again, then you total out your contribution margin. 70 plus 90 is $160. Once you have your total sales mix and total contribution margin, you can calculate your weighted average contribution margin. Your weighted average contribution margin is 160 divided by 8, which is equal to $20. Now that we have our weighted average contribution margin, our next step is to calculate our break-even point of total units. You're going to use this formula. The units sold is equal to fixed expenses plus operating income divided by weighted average contribution margin per unit. Earlier, when we were looking at a single product company, we divided this numerator by contribution margin per unit. But whenever we are looking at multi-product companies, instead of contribution margin per unit, we divide it by the weighted average contribution margin per unit. So let's go and plug in our numbers next. So we know that our units sold is equal to our fixed expenses, which is 7,000, plus operating income, and we know that at break-even our operating income is 0, and you're going to divide it by your weighted average contribution margin, which was 20. So we need to sell 350 posters, 350 units to break even. But keep in mind that this 350 posters is a sum of regular plus large posters. We don't know how many regular posters and how many large posters we need to sell. We just know that we need to sell 350 posters. Our third step would be to figure out how many regular posters do we need to sell and how many large posters do we need to sell. So how do we calculate how many posters we need to sell? Let's take a look at our regular posters. We know that we have 350 units that we need to sell to break even. Of that, how much should be regular? We need to take a look at our sales mix. We know that of our 8 total, 5/8 of that is going to be regular posters. So we multiply our 350 by 5/8 to come up with 218.75 posters. Now, you know that we don't sell 3/4 of a poster, so we round that up to 219 posters. For our large posters, again, 350 is the total number of units we sell, but of our 350, only 3/8 are large posters. That gives us 131.25, again, which we rounded up to 132. Now you know that we need to sell 219 regular posters and 132 large posters for us to break even. Again, this number, if you plug in 219, 132, you're going to have a number greater than 0, but that's just because physically we cannot sell, half a poster.